It is not my go-to nature to be calm and peaceful. You may have noticed. The people who know me best are laughing or containing themselves. Please, just let out the guffaw. It is the antithesis of my persona. And I even chose a very, very peaceful shirt today for me so that I'd be able to deliver this message. And when I reflect on that, it started a long, long time ago. See, I grew up in New Orleans, and one of the earliest memories I have of that is a hurricane that was about to hit. And if you know what hurricanes are, they're these giant, giant energy fields, all this collected and swirling energy. But in the middle of them, there's peace and there's calm and there's stillness. But there is a lot of movement. And at 5 years old, I remember a hurricane was coming. And my father and all of us gathered everything we could to get prepared for it. We filled all those tubs with water. We did all those things. My father took all the lawn furniture and all our toys from the backyard and tied it with a giant rope around the cypress tree that was growing in the backyard. And my brothers and sisters and I went around to all the windows and we put masking tape over all the windows like that was going to stop debris from flying through our windows. And when the storm hit, it was nighttime and it was dark, but the lightning was flashing everywhere and there was just horrible sounds and you could hear the wind and you could see things wishing by the window. And it went on what seemed like for hours. And my brother and sisters and I, the four of us, gathered in the family den and we watched as this all happened around us. And somewhere in the middle of the night, we fell asleep on the floor. Peace came over us. And when we woke up the next morning, the light had returned and the city was calm and peaceful, and New Orleans was still there. It was a magical place to grow up. I was infused with music every time I turned around. Music wafted out of restaurants because they had bands and live music in restaurants and bars. You'd walk down the street and you'd hear musicians on the corner, or you hear people singing. The the bells and the carillons on the steamships that would go up and down the river. You'd hear them. It was like walking into a movie. I remember watching from my grandmother's porch in the Garden District as a jazz band like this walked by, all coming back from a funeral, and everyone singing and dancing and filled with joy in the middle of their sorrow. And that juxtaposition of grief and death and life and joy was everywhere to be found. It was part of me, and it still is to this day. But it is also a very, very calm and southern city. It's slow because it's so hot. But I did find my peeps there. Eventually, I found my way to the French Quarter and Bourbon Street. And I found people who resonated with my love of life and energy and partying and joy. But I was still called to something bigger. So eventually, I found myself in the midst of Manhattan. And it was a perfect transition for me. When I got to Manhattan, I thought I had found my home. I thought I had found the place that this is where I belong. It's literally the city that never sleeps. And it was so exciting. It was the 80s in Manhattan. It was filled with life again. But also because it was the 80s, it was filled with death. Very much a parallel to New Orleans. The understanding of the AIDS crisis in Manhattan in the 80s, how that influenced my being and my activism and my desire to make the world a better place. When I arrived in 1980, there was a play that I happened to see. It was the first Broadway play I ever saw. was called The Elephant Man. Yes. And it changed me forever, right? It changed how I saw human relationships, and it changed how I thought about how we treat each other. The inhumanity that was displayed in that play was so piercing and hard that it was almost impossible to watch, and yet you couldn't turn your head away from it. I walked out of that theater that day forever changed, and I knew that's what I needed to do with my life, was to point out the pain of how we treat each other and what we think is right, and to shine a light on what could be. But my time in New York eventually came to an end for good reasons. Like, my husband got a job offer here, and I found myself deciding to relocate to Unity Village and become a minister, to actually step in to that journey. This is Unity Village if you've never seen it. It's a magnificent place. And I went from Manhattan to this tranquil place, trying once again to fit my energy into this little square box. And in all of my interviews when I was becoming a minister, and all of my, they had minister review panels called L&O, licensing and ordination panels. And they'd always say to me, Ken, we want you to be more authentic. And my good friend Paul Hasselbeck, who you all know, finally said to them, "This is who he is." This is authentic for him, because they wanted me to wear a suit. They wanted me to show up and give a talk in front of a lectern and be all buttoned up. And that's just not who I am, right? So it was a struggle to learn how to be authentic and peaceful in the presence of them. So on my last licensing and ordination interview, you had to go through 4 of them to be able to stand up here and do what I do. And so the last one, I showed up in jeans and a shirt like this, and they nearly fell out of their chairs. And the next thing I did is I pulled up a chair and I sat down, because there was only 4 of them in a room, and they wanted to understand how I would give a talk. So they wanted to see me do a talk. And so I pulled up a chair and I sat down and I talked to them and found their peace and serenity. And when I got back up, they said to me, "Well, that was very good, but you sat down." And I said, "I know. You asked me to be authentic, and I would never stand in front of 4 people and lecture to them. So I decided to pull up a chair and just have a conversation with you, because that's real for me." And they said, "But you're wearing jeans." I said, "I know. This is what I wear every day of my life." To put on a suit is inauthentic for me. And I passed with flying colors finally, but it was a journey to find how I could operate inside of that, right? When I got here to California, wow, it is so beautiful and so stunning here in San Francisco, but you guys do not know how to move fast. I'm sorry. California and San Francisco in particular is so laid back. If you could smoke another joint, I think we could go a little slower, okay? I was like, oh my God. Like, I moved from Manhattan to San Francisco, right? And my dry cleaner opens at 10 a.m. The mailbox place where we would get all our mail and packages, their hours for 10 to 5. Convenient for them, for me, not convenient at all. So it was this whole other life of adjusting my energy to a new way of being. And boy, once I surrendered to that, I found the joy and the bliss of going slower, of understanding peace and serenity in a new way. Now, I had studied a lot in ministerial school about how to meditate, how to be peaceful. But my way of connecting with the divine is more ecstatic. Like I'm a whirling dervish, right, folks? I'm a whirling dervish. And those passions and those connections are just as valuable, but to have the capacity to do both, to be still and to be vibrant was really a growing edge for me. And I offer that for you too, because there are infinite ways to connect to the divine. As many people in this room and as many people who are watching us online, you all have your own special way to connect with spirit. But then there was this moment. We've been living here. I've been working here. We've been creating this community, this really powerful place together. And one day, my husband, who's just walking in the door right now, walked up to me and he said, ah, I've been offered this day to breathe, a day-long retreat at this place in San Francisco. I think we should do it. And I said, it takes me a day at a retreat house just to relax enough. Then I can enter the retreat. A one-day retreat? Really? Really? A 7-day retreat. Let's go to a 3-day retreat. And he says, no, this is what it is. It's designed as a one-day retreat for working professionals here in San Francisco. And so I had to let go of my need to have it my way and say yes to this good that was showing up in my life. So we show up at this beautiful house in Land's End, absolutely stunning place with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? This is the view that I got to watch from the window of this retreat house, where these two incredible people guided JD and I on a personalized retreat for the two of us in absolute luxury and splendor. And I was like, "Oh, I think I can surrender to this. I might find my peaceful center now," as they catered to our every need. At lunchtime, after we had prayed, meditated, journaled, eaten, relaxed, they invited us on a nature walk along the coast. So I set out along the way, and all of a sudden, I found this grove of eucalyptus trees. And I jumped across the railing to where the sign said, "Keep on the trail," and nestled myself up in this grove of vibrant or aromatic eucalyptus. And I could see the ocean and the bay, and I could hear the boats and the birds and the animals. And I had my journal, and I had all the time I needed. And I sat and I contemplated and I waited and I let the moment be. At one moment, I reached for my journal, I took it out and opened it, and this came. The eucalyptus tree does not hesitate to shed its calcified, hardened bark in order to become a more magnificent and stronger version of what it's here to be. So I stopped dead in my tracks. I stopped resisting what is, and I surrendered to where I am as the perfect place for me to be. I found the peace of standing or sitting in that spot, and I vowed to grow and bloom and thrive where I am planted. The perfect place here on earth to turn this into the holy ground that I have always been seeking. And in the middle of a bustling city and a busy port and an all too busy day, I found peace, serenity, and stillness. And I moved from a human doing to a human being. And I moved away from having to worry and I moved away from anxiety. I moved away from fearfulness and stepped into peacefulness. In this season, we light the candle for peace. It is the season of light in many faith traditions. And we have the opportunity here and now to awaken to heavenly peace. You know, the universe, the galaxies, are almost exactly the same as the hurricane, all swirling around a calm and peaceful center. And the energy can constantly be shifting and changing on the outside of us. But here on the inside of us lies the infinite possibility of heavenly peace. Now, there's a song that many of us sing at this time. It talks about sleeping in heavenly peace. I'm going to have Marcus sing it, and then I'm going to invite us to awaken to heavenly peace.